Welcome in YouTube, the part two of the series of a mid 20-year-old going for their first home. And this is a really interesting series, I think. With the whole recession looming, and just yesterday on Thursday, the S&P 500 dropped, 5%. And it's a weird time for sure. And I would say most people are like, dude, you should not be buying a home, or do this, do that. I think the real response to that is like there's never going to be a so-called perfect time to buy a home, and if you do, it's more hindsight than foresight, because just cuz you were in a recession in 2020 and the rates dropped so bad, like in a good way, like they dropped like so much, it made more competition for homes, which really caused the home market to go up 20%, is what they say the rough estimate is. Homes are inflated, but you have to understand there's going to be a lot of predictions I have, especially with Gen Z and Gen Alpha coming up. I have some pretty good takes that honestly are like informal but make sense. The housing market can really do whatever it wants to do. And honestly, part one was a good video for us. We kind of went over like, debt to income. We went over like just, dude, if you even want to identify that you want to get a home or can get a home, what's your college loans like? What's your car loan like? Do you have an established plan for, all right, 2, 3 years at home, mom and dad or family, very low to maybe no rent, no utilities. I pay for my own food, my car bill, I pay my gas, my, phone bill. Like, you obviously pay your own stuff, but in terms of like the actual house, like the rent, you want to establish like a low rent plan, possibly free, because if you're going to be paying rent on your own, like for me, I'm by myself, don't have someone right now, whatever. So everything's going to be my income for my life. If I were to go in an apartment, well, an apartment and utilities and whatever, it's just going to be less money that would go towards a saving, stocks, money market, right? High yield savings, whatever, right? So understand that like you have to establish what is my plan to get where I'm going, because if it is going to be that you can't find a trusted friend or family, then obviously going to part two is going to be tougher, because part two, which where we're at now, is pretty much given that you don't have too much of college debt and you don't have too much of car debt, because those numbers are going to already affect a mortgage lender when they see your profile. They might not even give you the mortgage because you have too much debt already. So let's go ahead and now go over part two. And part two is pretty common sense. It's saying I may have some funds in the bank, but how good is my job or my income stream to withhold and maintain the job that I need to have to keep my payments going on my mortgage to go for 30 years. Because remember, this series is based on 20-year-olds, right? You're not going to get a 15-year loan. When I was younger, I always told myself, I'm going to do 15-year loans because I pay less interest. I pay it off quicker, so less interest to accrue. You're not going to get approved for that. Unless you're putting down like at least so much of a percent. And at that point, you probably were with mom and dad, or you were in a situation where you were like with a trusted friend, or you were paying like low rent for at least so many years, right? And you were really in a good plan. I mean, understand that I could be with my parents right now until I'm like 26, 27, 28. But at the end of the day, is that the life I want to live, right? Everyone has their own, plan, and that plan is a little bit ambiguous to this video. But given that you have a job that you can at least say is almost recession safe, now I'm not in a job where teaching is tenure, but I am in a job where education will never ever be affected by, like as a industry. Now, maybe my exact school or my exact district could change versus your district if you're a teacher, but like education as a whole, you're always going to have students. You're always going to have teachers. you're always going to need a principal at that high school down the street. It's how the school runs. So, like, is it recession safe? Because if you're going to be going at least a little bit, I mean, right now I'm looking at homes that are a little bit risky for me. If you're going in the territory where it's like, I need to have a job that I can count on. Yeah, I mean, to be fair, really anyone can get laid off at any point, honestly. There is no job that really is 100% safe unless there's like, again, that's ambiguous in this video, but like, all I'm trying to say is you need to make sure that you have either a good job that is going to get some raises or it's going to have a steady, vision plan, going forward. Because as you go forward in these 30 years, you have to understand cost of living will go up. So if you have a really nice job, but you don't really see that much room for improvement for 30 years, like you guys know we could talk about jobs for like a half hour in this video, right? You get the point. You need to understand that, especially as someone in their 20s who should be on the low totem pole of their company or their career path, like understand that like there is a risk involved in buying a home in your 20s, but at the end of the day, if I Google right now home charts, right? You've all seen those home charts on how they have just took off, or have taken off in the last 15, 17 years from 2008 to now. In fact, it's almost never went down in the last 17 years. So, all I'm trying to say is like, at some point you got to say like, I'm just trying to get in the system and just try to get in before it goes out there and just goes up too much. So that's kind of the thing in your 20s of why you would even consider it, because, with the way the home rates are, at some point you just got to say, I'm going to get involved, and I'm going to get involved now. And that's what I'm trying to do, right? So a big part of this video, without getting too deep and whatever, is you need to establish that in this series, at least for me, we're not only in our 20s, but also it's being single. It's pretty much saying, I don't have DINK. DINK is dual income, no kids. So dual income, no kids. The no kids is very important, no dependents, because anyone who has, if you're a teenage parent or you're a young, really anyone in their 20s who's a parent, right? The money that you would normally set aside for a mortgage is probably going to be put towards that child, because infants can be very expensive, from like, diapers to pacifiers to toys to daycares to getting in a preschool. Like, honestly, you almost have to have, I mean, nowadays, let's just be honest here, unless the working, female or male or someone in the relationship is literally having like well over 3 figures, it's going to be hard to have a mortgage and paying for the kid and having a stay-home mom or a stay-home dad for that matter. Like, it's going to be really difficult. That's almost by the wayside now. And it's embarrassing that that's the market we have now. My dad was, a hard worker at UPS, and he worked long hours, a delivery guy, and, they made great money, but at the end of the day, he worked his ass off. And he was able to support 3 kids, and my mom was a stay-home mom for, so many years, but she also worked very part-time with a teaching degree at like a daycare center. And she wasn't a full-blown teacher until we were older, and we didn't have the daycare, and she was there for us, and she nurtured us through childhood. So, be very careful, in some of these models, because as a mom or anyone watching this video in their 20s, be very careful, because what life do you want? Do you want to have it where you're able to stay home? So on a scale of 1 to 5, with 5 being the best home you could possibly get, you might want to get a 3 home, because then maybe you can afford to stay at home for like 5-6 years while your kid can at least develop to a stage where, oh, they're at kindergarten now instead of like preschool, which is like half day school. Like, do you want to have a life where you have a 5 home, which means you're working full time, your spouse is working full time, but then the kid has to go to daycare, which can be more costs, and your mortgage payment, maybe, paycheck to paycheck life. Like, these are all questions, recessions, job safe. Do I have kids? Do I not? Do I have dual income, DI? Like, all of these questions, what makes up part 2. And so, summing it up for me and how it relates to this series, I will let you guys know that, it's really no secret. You guys just know the truth. Like, from my YouTube streams, whatever. I mean, in all reality, having a significant other and having someone who spouse, whether you're dating, whatever, or in just the talking phases, we all know that it does take up a big part of your life, like socially, mentally, emotionally, and literally physically, with the time that it takes to go on dates and spend time on the phone with them or FaceTime, whatever. So it's like, you guys know the truth that, my academic studies, my YouTube series, my friend time, my family time, other stuff, like, I have not had that kind of life where, 1 week I'm with this person, other week I'm with this person. Well, Matt, why does that matter in this video? I've always known that, I'm not going to give in. I'm not someone who's going to go out there and just date to date, or I'm not going to go out there and just settle to settle and have someone. If I'm single for 35 years, I'm single for 35 years. So I'm literally pushing the button and saying, I'm going forward and we're going to do this with the pretty much the SL, the single life. And we're using this model, this series, in that single life approach. And if someone does come for dual income, down the road, my mortgage payments are even better, right? So that's really it for part 2. You need to, because for me, being a teacher, no job is exactly safe, but it's more recession safe in terms of keeping my job than it is other industries. So you got to see raise opportunities, recession, single dual income, kids factors. All these questions that we talked about in this video is so important to when you think about a home. And again, college loans, car loans, mine's very minimal as it gets. For me, I don't have kids. I don't have dependents. I don't got mouths to feed. I'm worried about myself. And I know myself. And I know what I can handle in my budget and, whatever. So it's like all these things in what makes up this part 2 of the video, 13-minute video here, these are important factors before we even go to part 3, which is going to be location and stuff like that. So that's what we have here today in this so-called podcast or in this so-called video. And I hope that this video helped in some way, shape, or form. We're going to go from there. Take care. Peace.